Hi, this is Cecil. Everybody knows that Grand Prismatic Spring is one of Yellowstone's most iconic sites, but one of the questions that we get asked so often on our tours or on our Yellowstone day hikes is, where do I go to get that picture of Grand Prismatic Spring from up high? So we know that there's a boardwalk system that runs around the Midway Geyser Basin, around Excelsior Geyser Crater and Grand Prismatic. But then there has to be somewhere else where you can go to get a picture from an elevated point so you're looking down on Grand Prismatic Spring. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in today's Yellowstone podcast. The trailhead to get to the Grand Prismatic Spring overlook is the same trailhead that you would take to go to Fairy Falls. So if you've listened to our Fairy Falls podcast, or if you've watched any of our virtual Yellowstone tours, which you can see at virtualyellowstonetours.com, you'll know where that is. But basically, just to the south of the Midway Geyser Basin and to the north of the Upper Geyser Basin and Old Faithful area is a parking lot right next to the road. It's very difficult to miss. Why? Because it's always full. The Park Service put in an extension to the parking lot a few years ago, but even that is always full. So the first bit of advice I'm going to give you is try and get there early so you can find somewhere to park. Otherwise, you're going to land up walking quite a distance to get to the trailhead, where you have to walk another short distance. So, assuming that you can park in the Fairy Falls trailhead parking lot, you will cross over the Firehole River, and pretty soon you'll see a sign that says Midway Geyser Basin. But before that, you're probably going to see a sign that says, "Caution, look out for bears." Even though there's a lot of people around on this trail, I always advise people to take bear spray with them. You can buy bear spray in our area in West Yellowstone and the other gateway cities, but it's so much more expensive to buy it here. So consider buying it before you get to wherever you're staying in Yellowstone. As you walk along the trail, you'll see a few thermal features, and then off in the distance, you'll notice steam coming off a thermal feature. And when I say a thermal feature, I'm talking about geysers, hot springs, mud pots, and fumaroles. In this case, the first lot of steam that you'll see coming off is from the Excelsior Geyser Crater. As you get a bit closer, you'll start to see wonderful hues of orange and blue and red steam coming off another thermal feature, and that's coming off Grand Prismatic Spring. Something I do need to mention to you guys, you should be aware of, that the Fairy Falls Trail, which once again also leads to the Grand Prismatic Spring Overlook, only opens in late May. The Park Service closes various parts of Yellowstone for what is called bear management. And I'll go into this in a lot more detail in another podcast, but this is an Area A, as in Alpha. This this bear management area, extends on the west side of the Grand Loop Road on the lower loop, just to the south of Old Faithful, and continues up on the west side, extending on the east side around the Firehole Lake Drive area, and it stops more or less in line with the Mary Mountain Trail, which is in itself closed for bear management, generally through about June the 15th or so. So, to get back to the actual hike, once again, park in the Fairy Falls trailhead parking lot and head off across the Firehole River. You'll see the thermal features off in the distance. And as you're walking, just before you get to Grand Prismatic Spring itself, on the right-hand side, on the left side of the trail, you'll see a smaller trail that goes up a hill. That's the trail that we're going to take. Now, in the old days, before the Park Service put in the new trail a few years ago, what we used to do was just clamber up that hill. We could go pretty much where we wanted, and we'd get pretty far up the hill, try and find a spot where there weren't any trees or bushes or whatever in the way, and get some great pictures. Well, the Park Service has put a viewing platform in. They've put a trail in, so it's a lot easier, but the trail doesn't go up as high as we used to climb up the hill, but you still get really good pictures. The trail is about 1.2 miles, so about 1.9 kilometers on a round-trip basis. It starts and ends at the same location. There is a little bit of a climb from the time when you leave the Fairy Falls trailhead at the bottom until you get to the platform looking back down on Grand Prismatic Spring in the Midway Geyser Basin. And that's probably about 105 feet or so. And the little climb is probably a little bit over half a mile, so about 0.8 of a kilometer or so. But then the views that you get are really stunning of Grand Prismatic, with the blue middle changing to the blues and greens as you get towards the edges, and then the oranges, the yellows, the reds, and the browns as the water cools off and more organisms are able to live there. It's a really simple trail. It's a really easy trail, which you can do. You'll find that there's a lot of people on the trail because they're heading out to Fairy Falls. Please also take a look at the video of this trail, which we have in our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and search for Yellowstone Tours, but search for Yellowstone Tours without a space in between Yellowstone and Tours, YouTube will ask you, hey, did you mean Yellowstone Space Tours? You'll say, no, I wanted Yellowstone Tours. And that'll bring up the link to our channel. And once you're there, search for the Grand Prismatic Spring Overlook Trail. You can also go to virtualyellowstonetours.com to take a look at it. In addition, we do offer this hike and many others as a guided hike, which you can see at Yellowstone which you can see at YellowstoneDayHikes.com. That's YellowstoneDayHikes.com, and all of our podcasts are at YellowstonePodcasts.com. Thank you for joining me on another podcast, and I'll catch you next time.